Hey there, career seekers. Welcome to Find Your Passion Career. I'm here to help you find a career you like, and dare I say, possibly even love. I'm your host, Amanda Nachman. I'm the founder and CEO of College Magazine. After working with thousands of college students, I've noticed that when it comes to career, there's a lot to demystify. Let's get started. You are qualified. My book, Qualified, helps you uncover your strengths and all the unique value you have to offer. Learn how to level up your story, make courageous connections, and speak with confidence to achieve your dream career. Get your copy and join the Qualified Challenge at amandanachman.com. Hi, everyone. Today I have with me Bryan Dik, PhD. He is a vocational psychologist, professor of psychology at Colorado State University, and co-founder and chief science officer of Jobzology. Bryan studies meaning and purpose in the workplace, calling and vocation in career development, and the intersection of faith and work. He has delivered keynote lectures on 4 continents and has published 4 books, including Redeeming Work and Making Your Job a Calling, and hosts the Purposeful Work podcast. Welcome to Find Your Passion Career.
Thank you for inviting me to be on your podcast, Amanda.
Yeah. Well, so Bryan, how did you see your career being back when you were in school? What did you imagine for yourself? I know that you had this crisis and you had a lot of passion. So can you share a little bit about that story?
Yeah, there are some ironies in my journey. As a 19-year-old, I was one of these students struggling to make decisions, declare a major. I kept the undecided or undeclared status. I was interested in lots of things, and the thought of choosing one, if that meant not choosing something else that was really appealing to me, was tough. So I had paralysis with my decision making, and ended up kind of defaulting into psychology. It was like, well, I had more credits in that than anything else. And I was a good student. I decided I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet, so I might as well just keep going to school. So I went into graduate school, and I don't remember exactly what those essays included, other than I went through all these different grad programs, figured out what faculty were doing there, and then wrote essays about how that area of work was my passion. You know, I mean, there's a you got to play the game, right?
Yeah, no, of course.
No, I think I did do it with integrity, but that's one of the advantages of being so open. You can say that lots of things are appealing to you. Yeah. Anyway, I landed in this grad program that had, I was too naive to even realize this before I got there. But once I ended up there, University of Minnesota, I learned they were kind of known for contributions to theory and research and practice related to career development. So that kind of set me on my path in this field, vocational psychology, studying how people make informed choices about their career. And eventually I kind of figured out that a lot of the clients that I was talking with in career counseling, that was part of our training, was learning to facilitate career counseling. They were talking about how they wished they had discovered their calling. And that was interesting to me because that's how I thought about it. What's my calling? And I kind of was struggling to figure that out too. And so I looked at what psychologists had to say. At that time, they had said very little about it, and I started to put 2 and 2 together and realize that maybe part of my calling is actually doing serious research on what it looks like to discern and live out a calling in life. And that was, 20 years ago, and we've built a career obsessively focused on understanding that question.
Yeah. And how do you research that, right? It seems like this big, problem that we're trying to solve. Helping people find their passion. Some people find that it's this one-on-one process. Other people may find that it's something that can be done and taught in a lecture hall. But how do you research it?
Well, I think the key is to start not with the question, how do you help people discover that? You first figure out, what does this look like for people who experience it? And then what difference does it make in their lives? So in psychology, when you study something, you have to define it first. Then you have to come up with a way to measure it. So we develop these scales to measure the extent to which someone is searching for a calling, experiencing one, or living one out. And then as soon as you can assess it, then you can administer surveys to large groups of people, measuring a sense of calling along with lots of other things that you care about, attitudes, well-being. And then you look at how all those things are related. And
Mm.
so that's
You can
been
see the
done.
connection between, oh, this person took these steps and they feel that they have these successful career outcomes. They're feeling
Yeah.
like they're matched with their calling.
Right. And once you establish that a sense of calling is linked to all kinds of positive outcomes, and interestingly, some negative ones at times. So
Mm.
we can get into that if you're interested. But
Ooh.
then the question is, how do you work backward from that? How do these people who are, living their best lives, expressing their gifts in the world in ways that make it better, how did they get there? And then you can start to think about, well, if these people took these steps to get there, how can we encourage other people to do those same things, hopefully experiencing those same positive outcomes?
Were there any steps in the process or findings that surprised you in your research?
Sure. A couple of things. So first of all, we thought that having a calling or looking for a calling and having a calling would be negatively related, that people who are
Hmm.
searching for a calling are searching for one because they don't have one. And so they're on this quest to find it. And then once they experience it or discover what it is, then they'll stop looking because they've got it after all, right? But what we discovered was that actually those things are very closely connected. And almost by definition, part of having a calling means you're always looking for ways to enhance it, expand it, increase it, find new opportunities linked to it. So it's not like looking for keys that you lose in the cushions where you scramble to find it. And once you find it, you're done because you've got it. It's an ongoing process. It's almost a lifestyle of always engaging in this question: what's next for me? And how can I do what I'm doing now, but in a more effective way or in a better way or in a different type of role?
Yeah, I think that is something that everyone learns over time. But if we could tell those people that are starting out on this path that, like, hey, it's a journey,
Yeah.
so much like of that, the paralysis, I think, could be solved because you won't be feeling like, okay, every first step has to be perfect. Like this next move right after graduation or this next job, this one has to be the answer. Like nothing has to be the answer because you're going to be in another phase in your life. You're going to be looking for that next challenge. I've personally experienced that in my own career.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. I think a lot of young people put loads of pressure on the kind of the first step, right? What's that first job you're going to take out of college, or what's your major going to be? And it just feels like you get locked in to one path, and it's hard to move out of that. But the current world of work, change is the rule, not the exception.
Yeah.
The average American is, even pre-pandemic, had held 12 jobs before age 50.
I
And
was just saying that stat the other day on a live
yeah,
TikTok. I'm like, oh, don't quote me on this. I think it's 12.
yeah, yeah, give or take,
Yeah.
there's a decimal in there. But yeah, so if you recognize that change is just part of what you can expect, then you start focus. First, you realize that, okay, maybe I should just give myself a little bit of a break, not put so much pressure on this kind of getting the first thing right. But it also means developing the ability to adapt and adjust. I think the more young people are able to obtain and practice that skill, the better off they'll be going forward.
Yeah. And I think adapting to when things didn't go the way you thought it might, or when you don't get that big opportunity that you've been hustling for, that you've been pining after. Can you talk a little bit about career rejection or not feeling qualified to go after what you want? Have you ever felt that way in your own career?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm an academic. I work at a university, and lots of academics, if you talk to them, they will share how, these sort of feelings of insecurity drive their motivation to achieve. It's funny, related to this question. I served on a panel on failure recently. I felt so honored that when someone was putting together a panel on failure, they would think of me as someone who would be a good panelist.
I am so jealous. I hope that I one day get to serve on a panel on failure. That sounds so wonderful.
Well, it's funny, so much of the kind of work that we do as academics or as like a research psychologist, just failure is hand in glove, the name of the game in terms. It's a game of persistence. Every paper that I published in a journal, with a very small number of exceptions, has been rejected by two or three other journals. And so it's just part of it. It hurts, it sets you back, it extends the timeline, but you persist and you keep after it, and eventually you'll find a success. The hardest thing for me, as far as the rejection, is grants. Those are the things that increasingly have so much value in the eyes of administrators, bringing money in, and those are the things that if you write a grant proposal and you don't get it, there's not a lot you can do with it. You can't just turn around and go to another agency and propose the same project. So those have been crushing, and I'll just tell you, I've got a long history of getting really close to getting big grants, but then not ultimately getting them in the end.
That that does sound heart-wrenching because you're coming up with a hypothesis specifically for that and giving all of your evidence that you possibly can just for that specific grant. And you're right, that's hard to repurpose. Although the experience of writing it, I'm sure, makes you better at writing the next one. How do you persevere through that? How do you persevere?
Well, you do learn and adjust your strategy. You always do kind of a post-mortem, like what could we have done differently here? What was the difference between success and failure, and why did we land on the failure side? And so there is a type of failure. It's, first of all, you have to realize it's not an indictment of you as a person.
Yes,
There's
it's
so
not
many
personal.
there's so many things that are outside of your control in this. And so it's just recognizing that, there's it's kind of a game, and we lost the game this time, but what can I learn more about what the rules are and how we can kind of work within them to ensure a better outcome? It's building resilience, and sometimes it's helpful just to kind of put it in the past and move forward and not think about it. But I think before you do that, it's useful to just dig in a little bit and say, what are the 3 to 5 things that I learned from this that I can do differently next time? Hopefully have a different outcome.
Yeah. And how many of us do stop and think about that and take that moment to say, what can I learn? Like, even if that was a terrible letdown, terrible experience, is there something I can learn from this? Could I have prepared more? Could I have done something differently? Is there something that maybe wasn't the right fit? And look at that. What do you think qualified means? What does qualified mean to you? Because that's the subject that I explore in my book. And, I do think that there's no right or wrong answer to this. So I'd be interested to hear your perspective.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about this within the world of work, I think about qualified in maybe a different way than other people might. I mean, usually when I think about this, I think about it from the perspective of an employer. Who are the qualified candidates? And employers are pretty good at figuring out who's best equipped to do the job. But I think about it more in terms of who who is the best fit for the role, right? It's a hire for fit, train for talent kind of scenario for me. And so the question of who's qualified, it's yes, who is above the minimum threshold needed to do this type of job, but it's not, when you get in that top group, who has the most well-developed skills, who has the largest number of previous experiences that translate to this one. I don't think about it that way. I think of it in terms of, whose sense of purpose is going to align most closely with what we're asking them to do. Knowing that we can train the specific skills, provided they meet the threshold for abilities. We can train the specific skills, but we want to invest in folks who are going to do this for a long time because it matters to them. They care about it. It aligns with what matters to them most in life. That's the stuff I think. Not every employer thinks that way, but when you ask me how I think about qualified, I think of it in terms of fit first and talent or skills second.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right that there's this, certain level of expertise that we're looking for, experiences that someone's had or skill sets that someone's developed. But then after that, it's how do we choose between those people? And it's this passion fit. It's people want to work with people who share a passion. If you're hiring someone and you love the work that you're doing, you want to bring someone in that also loves that work, that is excited about it, that wants to grow and be part of that experience. And I think that that's going to be the fit over someone that's just looking for anything. I think that's the hardest. When people are looking for a job and they're like, oh, I'll be willing to do anything. People aren't attracted to the willing to do anything.
Well, I think part of it is you can invest a lot of resources in a new hire who's really talented, but if they don't love it, then you're putting so much into training this person only to see them walk away and leave.
Yeah.
And the other side of that coin is, if you're someone who's really talented, don't look at the external parts of a job, how prestigious it is, how much it pays. I mean, those things are part of it. I get that. But think about what allows you to express your gifts in ways that make the world better, in a way that links to what matters most to you in life. If you find an organization and a role within it that allows you to do things that answer that question, that align with your sense of purpose, that's when you'll love what you're doing and when it'll really matter. Your employer will love you. You'll learn the skills you need to do that job well, but it'll bring you so much joy. And that, I think, is really crucial.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Tell me, what sparked you to write Make Your Job a Calling?
Great question. Well, that was a co-authored book with a good friend of mine, Ryan Duff. He was at University of Florida. So Ryan and I were always kind of thinking of ways to work together and on new projects. And
how do you co-write? Do you say okay, you're going to take chapter 9 and I'm going to take chapter 10?
It was like that. I mean, I don't think there's a right way to do it or a recipe, but we did kind of collaborate on the outline and then just divide it up. And then, kind of trade off. So here's my draft of chapter 4, go at it. And he'd send me his draft. You do need one person to kind of take responsibility for giving it the same voice throughout. So there is that. But
that's true.
But no, we were doing all this empirical research on calling, and it was new. And it was starting to attract a little bit of attention. And what was unique about it, because there's lots written on that topic, but there wasn't much of a science behind it. And so we wanted to kind of take all these powerful stories we were hearing from folks, and then describe a little bit about what we've been learning from empirical psychological research on this. And what is the evidence base that's accumulating, and then what does that mean? Because if you want your job to be a calling, then you need to do what works. My bias is do what works. And so you can kind of use instinct or guessing what works, but why not look at what actually has been demonstrated to work in research? That's what we wanted to kind of pull together.
Can you share a little sliver of what works for our listeners who don't have the book yet, but should?
Sure. Well, I mean, so there are different ways to answer that question. And one way is to say, okay, given what research has demonstrated makes a difference in outcomes from career counseling. Okay. What are the types of tasks that happen in career counseling that differentiates the clients who have really good outcomes from the ones who have poorer outcomes? There's research on this. So it's things like engaging in written goal setting exercises. Goals are super important, but putting them in writing gives them an extra punch. It's like first of all, you're articulating it in a way that might be harder to do when you're just talking about it, but it also, you create a kind of contract with yourself. So that's one. Individualized interpretation and feedback. This is a role for assessments. So, assessments never tell a person what they should do with their lives, but if you're trying to make informed choices, good, high quality assessments with strong evidence of reliability and validity, all that is really, really crucial at helping you understand how you're unique and getting language for that. There's accurate and up-to-date occupational information. A lot of us don't know what we don't know. And so if we're trying to make decisions and they're informed decisions, you really need access to good information about what different opportunities really entail and what they require. And then the last two, there's 5 of these things that we talk about in the book. The last 2 are very relational. So one of them is just leaning on support from important others in your life. Don't make the decision-making process, don't let it occur in a vacuum, but lean on people in your life who have your back and who have your best interests in mind. Stay away from people who have an agenda. We all know, we all have those people in our lives. But, maybe you create a personal board of directors and kind of lean on their guidance and candid honesty in informing your choices. And the last thing is role models. Who do we know in our lives who we admire and respect and who are doing the kinds of things that we want to be able to do? And what can we learn from them? If we identify with people who have gone through this process and come out on the other side in great shape, it gives us a lot of confidence that we can do that too.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head with those 5 steps. I've seen it come to life with students that I've worked with. And I especially love, creating your board of directors and role models. And not just people on Instagram or TikTok that are doing something cool, but somebody that's doing what you aspire to do maybe 10 years out that you could connect with to understand what their journey looked like. And what you're going to find is that it's not always this linear path and that it's varied. And you're going to get it's going to spark something for you. You're going to get some ideas. Oh, maybe I could take that class too. Maybe I could apply at that organization that I hadn't heard of before. Maybe I could speak to this person that person recommended.
That's right. And genuineness is so important. I mean, you mentioned influencers, and you can learn a lot from kind of hearing this is how I got here kind of thing. That can be helpful, but I'm always suspicious of how authentic that is. And so find people who are authentic and genuine and latch onto them and learn from those folks. That is really, really crucial.
Yeah. Anyone who's telling you that the journey was super easy and they got there in like 3 months, like, please go and find another mentor that will tell you about the years of slaved work. Yeah. Well, so tell me about the object you brought and how it reflects your passion.
This was an interesting request. I have not really thought about objects reflecting my passion in this way before. So I don't know if this is a good one or a bad one. I've been sipping coffee out of this mug. Okay, this is a special mug. It's got Abraham Kuyper's face on it. All right. Now, people probably don't know who Abraham Kuyper is. He's a late 19th century, early 20th century Dutch pastor, theologian, prime minister of the Netherlands. He started a newspaper, and he started the Free University of Amsterdam. He's this Renaissance guy. He did it all. And I've always been kind of an admirer of Abraham Kuyper because he's had this expansive view of the role and relevance of faith in all of life. And that's something that matters a lot to me. So I've always admired that. Now, in 2017, we had the first international conference of research on calling. And it was in Amsterdam, and it was actually at the Free University of Amsterdam, which was founded by this guy. So I was just totally geeking out about this. And the organizer of that conference, a scholar at the Free University named Evgenia Lysova, I think she got such a kick out of my admiration for the founder of their university that she bought me this mug. And so
I thought the mug brought you there, but now I'm seeing the mug was the gift after getting you there.
I do my best work when I'm caffeinated, and so that's part of it. But when Abraham Kuyper is looking at me in the eyes, I notice you're imbibing as well. Anyway, so that's kind of a way of pulling together various passions of mine.
I love that story. That's awesome. And I think identifying this role model somehow magnetized you too. Like it's almost like the universe bringing you to this university because of that. Like that there was this connection.
Well, in some ways it was a happy accident, but I did feel like, okay, this is Providence. I have to get over there, in part because these are people who are at the cutting edge of this area of research. And this was the first gathering of global, people all over the world doing this work. It was super cool and a huge honor to be invited to be part of it because it was a very small gathering. But the fact that it was at the university that this guy founded, and they got a statue there and all that stuff. I got my mug, this mug, my face mug, on a selfie with Abraham. But anyway, it was great, very meaningful.
That's awesome. Well, before we go, can you tell me any advice that you have for emerging professionals today? career advice specifically?
Sure. Well, so any advice? A few things. First of all, understand what makes you unique. And then when you evaluate opportunities, think about fit. Think about how well a new opportunity is going to align with your interests, what you enjoy, with your values, what's important to you. The better the fit, the more likely you are to be satisfied. But then move beyond just fit in terms of your personal attributes. Think about what matters to you most in life. What are you on this earth to do? And how can you use whatever role you're pursuing to express your gifts in ways that make the world better? I think there's so much of a focus on what I get out of things, on me, on my own personal happiness. And the paradox is that the more we're focused on the contributions we make to the world around us, the more happy we feel personally. So that I think is really crucial. The other thing would be brace yourself, because there's going to be lots of change. And the better equipped you are to adapt to change, then the better off you'll be. But changes in job titles, nobody describes their calling in terms of their job titles. Callings always transcend a job title. So think about the big picture and realize there's lots of right answers. There's lots of ways to get it right. And so keep your eyes on the prize, recognizing that whatever you're doing right now at this stage in your life, you can be pursuing a path that aligns with that calling, and the world will be better and you'll feel pretty great about it too.
Yeah. And I like the point of not connecting your calling to an actual company or job role, but thinking about really just what matters to you, and start there, because then that opens you up to a lot of opportunities versus I'm just thinking about this one company and if it's make or break.
Companies and job titles, those are vehicles, right? Those allow you to express your calling, but your calling is not limited or contained by those things.
Perfect. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Bryan. Today, after listening to this podcast, I hope that you will think back to a moment of what you may have deemed a failure and think about and write down what you could learn from that, because you probably didn't do it then, right? So let's take that time to get intentional, and then take some time this week to think about what matters to you and leave out the vehicle and just think about your calling. Thank you so much, Bryan.
Thank you. It's been a blast.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening to our show. Be sure to check out the show notes and email any questions to yourpassioncareer@gmail.com. Bye.